must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military industrial complex.
In my line of work, you gotta keep repeating things over and over and over again for the truth to sink in. You gotta catapult the propaganda. You gotta catapult the propaganda. Propaganda, 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 propaganda.
What's up, everybody? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Today we got Aaron Franz. He's an author, filmmaker, researcher. He did the book Revolve, Man's Scientific Rise to Godhood, and also the documentary called The Age of Transitions. And super interesting guy. In the video episode, I'll put links to all his stuff. And we talk a lot about eugenics, transhumanism, just the singularity theory, all these things that are just really interesting topics in the future of technology and where it's taking us, and our personal opinions and theories on it, and some of the future technologies, and how it's going to affect the world we live in. So just very interesting. Man versus machine, I think it's just an interesting topic for a lot of us. Terminator and a lot of other movies have kind of, poked at that idea, and who knows, it could be reality one day. I think one thing we do an awful job at is knowing exactly how quickly technology is going to evolve and how far it's going to go. I mean, 20 years back or 50 years back, we would have never imagined the world we live in today with the power that we have in our pocket every day in a cell phone, just the ability that it has and all that. So it's a super interesting conversation, and so enjoy. And thanks everybody who's been listening. What I'd start off with this, well, I didn't start off with the show. I ended the show with 4 questions that I think I'm going to start doing now, just to kind of do something different, and hopefully we can be exposed to some new stuff. But I'm going to ask every guest 4 questions at the end of the show. Who's their favorite artist or album, favorite documentary or book, favorite comedian, and favorite podcast. So stay tuned to hear Aaron's responses to that, and enjoy the show, guys. If you like the show, retweet it, share it, do whatever, rate it on iTunes or wherever you're listening to podcasts, Stitcher Radio or Podomatic, or if you're watching it on YouTube, like it and share it and all that stuff. So all that little bit of effort goes a long way and helps a lot. So and also remember the Theory 6 project. It's my music project. It's available on Google Play, iTunes. It's available everywhere. So if you want higher quality versions of some of the music you hear in the podcast, then definitely check it out and support the show and keep this thing going. So thanks again, guys. I'll keep this intro short, and I'll see you on the next show. I got another one coming up, so stick around and make sure you subscribe to the show so you can get an update for each new episode, because I have tons of awesome guests lined up. So until the next one, peace. Hey, thanks for being with me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I was just gonna say, how do you like the background?
It's weird because not a lot of people do video episodes. So like every time I have somebody on and they do a Skype video interview, I'm always wondering. I'm like, I wonder if they changed anything in their house to make it look a little bit more presentable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have. I'm thinking about taking this down, but I don't know. I can't tell if I like it or not.
Yeah, it looks good. I mean, instead of doing just completely white, and I'm in a basement. I did my studio in a basement. When I first built the studio, it was supposed to be just for music. So I wasn't supposed to film anything down here. And then once I decided to start the podcast, I'm like, dude, I gotta do something with this background because it's just like, just a shitty walls, and it's not, the basement's not completely finished or whatever. So I'm like, you know what, I'll just put some sheets up. And then I had the amazing Jonathan on, the comedian, and he was busting my balls about having sheets in the background.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, it's all good and fun. I mean, a lot. That's the thing. It's hard to invest any real money in something that doesn't make you any money. So how's your podcast going and everything? I know you just put out a podcast recently talking about all the shows you've been doing and stuff.
Yeah, that one is a whole lot of nothing. That's just a quick one. That was a lazy one, actually. I was like, well, I've been doing so many interviews, I don't feel like doing an actual show this week. More or less, I didn't say it in so many words, but that's what that was.
Well, I hear it.
But
the thing is that when you do that many interviews, you probably feel like you're repeating yourself if you do another show.
Yeah, stuff like that. It's just like, I mean, like you said, this isn't a job or anything. So, it's something I'm doing in my free time. So I get to make the rules, That's the way I see it. It's no big deal.
Well, I'm kind of the same way. It's like so many times I overthink things and I'm like, I wonder if I should do this. And I'm like, dude, why am I overthinking things? There are no rules and nobody really knows the right way of doing it. Everybody has their own thing. I don't do any editing on the show from when the interview starts to like the end. The only editing I do is like I'll do either things that help the quality. Either I'll try to take out some background noise or try to level out the volumes a little better. I don't do any actual editing of like cutting our conversation. And I know it's I've had some guests on that they're like, the non-editing thing's not my thing, but it's cool. And I'm just like, but I feel like the non-editing thing, like you get like a good feel of the beginning to end, and there's no cuts, there's no sometimes I sound like an idiot, and I let people know I sound like an idiot by not editing it out, and I think it gives a very human point of view to me, like it's like, oh, he's human, he's not the perfect speaker, he doesn't have his his notes where everything he says is just written down and well thought out, so he sounds way more intelligent than maybe he really is if I was at a bar having a drink with him. So it was just I think people like that aspect of it, and I think that's why people drifted to podcasts in the first place, was because people were tired of that Q&A bullshit conversation, that you saw on Fox News, on our MSNBC, where it's just like typical questions, typical answers, and every interview you see with that same person, they're giving the same, talking points. And it's just, the one thing we liked about podcasts and is the fact that it was just uncensored. You got to see a point of view, or like I had this guy Enter Shikari, Rao Reynolds from Enter Shikari, this UK metal / industrial band. And, I've had some feedback about how people love the fact that we started off talking about music, but then most of the show was more about his political views and social issues that really move him and stuff like that. And that's something that, a lot of interviews you're not going to get. And so and it's really because of the way I do the podcast, they're like yourself, there really aren't any rules. So I just kind of go wherever the conversation takes me, and I don't try to have guidelines. A friend of ours, who you've been on his show and he's been on mine, James Corbett, and actually James has been on your show too. But I remember every time he's on, he asks me for like topics. He's like, "What are we going to talk about?" And like the last time he was on, like it was like the end of the show, and I'm like, "Holy shit, James, sorry again because we didn't talk about any of this shit I told you we were going to talk about." But I think that's the nice thing, is that you don't know where it's going to go, and you can enjoy yourself. And because it's not this isn't a job, I try my best to make sure it doesn't end up feeling like a job, because no matter how much you love something, if you do it enough, it's going to feel like work. So it just,
Yeah. No, you do a good job there. I like the aspect of your show that I like is the variety of the guests. I love that. How you had the amazing Jonathan on. I mean, I know him, and I was like, oh yeah, this guy's really cool. It's fun to have him on a podcast, and a podcast like this where you have other guests like James Corbett. I think there's more room for doing that sort of thing, actually. And I think more people will start being expanding their horizons and the guests and the things that they talk about, all that sort of stuff. I think there's going to be more of that here coming up.
Well, the way I look at it is that it was hard. There's so many interesting people that I wanted to talk to or try to get on the show, but none of them were in like the same field. Like it wasn't like just alternative news guys or just comedians or just musicians. Like I thought there's like tons of interesting people that I'm a fan of in all these different things. So I'm just like, well, who am I to say I can't try to get all these different guests? And if anything, I hope that like maybe some of the amazing Jonathan guests our fans end up watching the show and getting exposed to James Corbett, and vice versa. You know, some of the Enter the Shikari, you know, guests, and they're kind of a social issue, political issue band, gets exposed to some of the alternative media guys I have on. So it's just like, I hope that it all kind of brings it together, where I just try to have people on that are interesting, no matter what their background is, and people that I'm a fan of, or I'm, you know, I've either read their book or watched their documentary, or listened to their music, and you know, and for me, it keeps it interesting, like yourself. Instead of talking about the same issues every single show, you know, I do get like, okay, I'll do a couple serious shows about more serious issues, and then I have the amazing Jonathan on, and then it's like you get to, you know, just talk about stand-up comedy and stuff that's kind of, you know, beyond that. But it was cool even with that show, because then we got into him being an atheist, and I don't know if you're familiar with his story, but like he's basically dying, and he doesn't have much time left. So it was just like, so that was really interesting, getting in that topic. Like, okay, this person can see the end of the line, he can see the finish line, but yet he's an atheist. Where's your, you know, what's your mindset? Like, what are you thinking? How is that affecting you? And that's was a really interesting conversation. So it just, you know, but that's the fun stuff, because I feel like, you know, there are people like James Corbett who can do put so much media out there and so much material, and for some reason it always seems interesting. But for me, I don't think I'm capable of doing that, of like just focusing on certain topics and still be interesting. I think either I'd be bored or I would just sound like I'm repeating myself. And he's so researched and so well spoken that he's just a fun person to talk to and to listen, you know, just because the way he remembers information and stuff like that, it's unreal. I think he's somebody in the alternative media that I think we all kind of look up to.
Yeah, he's good. I think it's good that you have him on your show in I guess unscripted format, where you just ask him whatever questions. I think that's good, because I think the listeners want that sort of thing out of him, because they're so used to his format where he's like, okay, the show's about this, it's outlined. It's nice to get him sort of off the cuff, relaxed there. So that's definitely cool too.
Yeah. It's weird, because every once in a while people do ask, oh, you know, what are we going to talk about? What topics? And sometimes if it's a guest that like just came out with a book, or like yourself, you have a book and you have a film, and about similar topics. So it's pretty easy to find things to talk about, because it's like, well, obviously we're going to talk about what you're most knowledgeable about. But when you have somebody like James Corbett, who's so informed with so many different topics, that it's just like, well, how do I pinpoint what a couple topics I want to talk to him about? I want to talk about everything, you know, and so it just, with those type of guests, or like even Guy Evans, I know you've been on his show, and he's on a little hiatus at the moment. I've been trying to keep up with his show and trying to figure. I know he was having some back issues and stuff, and right before he was on his hiatus, he was supposed to be on my show again, and then he's like, something came up. He's like, I'll get back to you, and then I haven't heard from him since. So hopefully everything's all right. But you know, I don't know. Have you talked to him recently?
I haven't. I need to get a hold of him and see what the deal is if I can.
Yeah,
I don't know what happened.
Yeah, it seems weird to go this long, but I know that you know, with full time, it's not weird, because we all have like, you know, bills and priorities, so it's easy to get caught up in you know, everyday life priorities, and then just putting this aside, and then never getting around to it. That's like the hardest part of it, is just, you know, finding the time to continue putting in the work. I mean, you did two things that take quite a long amount of time, and that's a documentary and Revolve, your book. And writing a book and doing a documentary is so time consuming, I'm sure, that it's unbelievable to, you know, when you meet people that find that much time to do it, you know. And how was that? So the film came first, right? I was gonna hit record and start recording this, but fuck it, we'll just keep talking, and I'll just put it all together at the end. But
okay.
So your book is Revolved: Man's Scientific Rise to Godhood, and then Age of Transitions is your documentary, which people can find on your website, and which is, what's your website? It's the
website is ageoftransitions.com.
ageoftransitions.com, and that way people can find interviews with Aaron. You can find all types of stuff, all your work that you're working on. And so I think the documentary came first, right? And it came out like probably 3-4 years ago.
Yeah, it came out in 2008. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was first. Yeah, there's a whole story behind the making of the documentary too.
Share it.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
how did it come about? What made you so intrigued with this topic of which I like to try to dumb things down a little bit, because sometimes I get people who write me and they like a show, or I talk to them about it, and they're not very familiar with all the topics that we talk about. So like transhumanism and like stuff like that, and even eugenics. I know there's people who've listened to the show and they've asked me, oh, what exactly is eugenics, and what's some resources to kind of look up some stuff on it. And so there's some words that I think sometimes we hear often, but we don't necessarily completely understand. So like, how did you get involved with this topic of and created this film?
The topic, coming along to the topic is an interesting story. I was into alternative ideas, alternative subjects. I was in a 9/11 truth group actually around 2006, 2007. So I was immersed in researching the ideas that surround that. Watching a lot of films like Aaron Russo's Freedom to Fascism, all that genre of films, alternative films. So I was very much into those. I was into the activism aspect of it too. And while I was, looking up various things, learning, one of the topics I kind of stumbled upon was transhumanism. I just came across the Wikipedia page on transhumanism. I don't even know how that happened, but I remember where I was when I did. I was at a friend's apartment. I remember looking it up. I was like, whoa, what is this? And it just took me aback. And the main subject that really threw me for a loop, and one that I connected to the other stuff I learned in alternative research, was that of life extension. Because transhumanists are into the life extension idea, and their ideal is to live forever. And they're saying that may be possible sometime soon if the research goes far enough. That's what their ideal is. That's what they want to do, is live forever. So I saw that and I went, okay, I hear this living forever concept and everything else with transhumanism. But I've previously heard that there are too many people in the world, overpopulation, population bomb, we got to depopulate. And there's the whole idea in the alternative that there's like forced depopulation programs on the books. And, that's a conspiracy that exists. So I was aware of all that, obviously. And I was just wondering, okay, how does this overpopulation concept mesh with life extension concept? If we got people living forever now, there's going to be more and more people, and they're not going to die, so the earth is going to fill up. Yes, obviously. So that was a dialectic that intrigued me. And just the whole transhuman project with all the advanced technologies was troublesome to me as well. So I was like, okay, this is an important thing that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, that's interesting, the idea, because anybody who's in alternative media and I was the same way. One of the events that really opened my eyes to what was going on in the world and really helped me realize that like things might not be what they seem was the 9/11 thing. And I think a lot of people in our, wait, oh, you're still there. I thought I lost you for a second. But it was the 9/11 thing. Yeah, the 9/11 thing I think was a huge eye opener to a lot of people. I remember the first time I watched Loose Change, I felt like, I felt like checking my closets and under my bed, because I felt like, holy shit, like what is going on? Are people spying on me? What's really going on? And it was just a huge eye opener. And so a lot of people in those crowds have talked a lot about you hear about chemtrails, you hear about depopulation. Was it the Guidestones that mention it? And
Georgia Guidestones, it's a big one for depopulation.
But that's the other thing. Well, transhumanism, the idea that technology will keep advancing and humans will keep finding ways to evolve, and I guess it's possibly eugenic. I mean, technology might be just a part of eugenics, of Darwin's theory of the strong survive, and maybe we get to a point that we combine technology and humans, and then you do choose how long you can want to live for. And that's a pretty insane idea, because I'm not sure I'd want to live forever. And I wonder what your mindset, would you appreciate things, your outlook on life? There's just so much to it that it's just like, wait, if I could live forever, we already take every day for granted, and we know we don't live forever. So imagine if you knew you lived forever. So looking into this topic, how do they fit together, the depopulation and transhumanism, and the idea of like possibly living forever, immortality?
Well, it's definitely a dialectic, and dialectics are things that you come to recognize with studying alternative subjects, alternative media. It's a big point made that the dialectic method is that you show the thesis antithesis and synthesis. So the thesis and antithesis are just two opposite ideas. So you show one idea and you show the opposing idea, similar to, left-right politics in America, the two opposing ideas. And you get the debate between the two. Everybody hears about it. It's a big conversation on the news and in the media. Everybody hears about it. Everybody knows both sides. But what's the real reality down the road that comes of the debate and the actual subject at hand? It's not the extreme left or right side, the thesis or antithesis. Neither one of them prevails and gets their ideal future in place. It's a blending of the two. So the two have to come together, at least somewhat. That's the synthesis. That's the real reality of the case. And it goes back to, the German philosopher Hegel and all that, and some interesting history there. But yeah, so it's definitely a dialectic, the living forever and the depopulation concept. And I have to wonder if, some of the same people, the same sort of establishment is using or progressively will use this dialectic more in the future, I think is something to look out for, where they do dangle both sides in front of us just as things to ponder. Like, oh yes, there's depopulation, but there's also technologies that can make you live forever. So you're given both these ideas as necessary projects for society to take on. And I can see a rather disturbing synthesis of these things that's akin to a lot of the dystopian fiction that so many people are familiar with when it comes to this.
Well, there's that millionaire that Joe Rogan questions everything, that sci-fi show. They had that episode about the GF 2045 and with the Russian billionaire who was really pushing, or a lot of people believe that by 2045 it's a special number because by then people can live forever and stuff like that. And do you think that it's really, doing your research and stuff like that, do you think that's possible by 2045? That's something that's probable, or is that just the 2000 thing, the Y2K is just a number, and then once we get past from I guess we were wrong, we'll just move on to the next number?
Yeah, with a lot of the transhuman concepts and technologies, I think a lot of them are overblown, and the singularity isn't going to happen as it's been written about in the Ray Kurzweil books and things like that. I think more of the important things to look at are the realities of the technology in our current world. There are a lot of real developments of many of these technologies currently. The life extension one specifically is a tricky one because any real development in that is difficult to trace beyond just new findings in healthy lifestyle, things like that. Or if you eat this particular food or you take this sort of supplement, it's been shown that you can extend your life. Remember to exercise. That's something that we all know, but it's repeated in news reports constantly, like it actually is a piece of news over and over again. So that's always humorous. But that sort of stuff. In terms of the actual hardcore life extension research, I know that transhumanists and people who are into life extension complain a lot that there's not enough investment in that. So at least exoterically, it's not happening. That's not to say that it's not happening underground somewhere. That wouldn't surprise me in the least. I really don't know in that sense.
What's your opinion on the idea of living forever? You think that, well, for people who don't know what the singularity theory is, could you explain that?
Yeah. Singularity, in a nutshell, is when artificial intelligence computers become as intelligent as human beings. So it's able to, work out problems. And beyond that, its intelligence starts expanding. That's the nature of this AI, is that it will keep getting better and better up to human level. But once it gets to that level, it doesn't stop. It keeps going. Once it keeps going, it's able to augment itself in an intelligent fashion where AI can do further AI development. You're like, well, okay, humans developed me with this process. Now I'm going to take it on myself and I'm going to expand my intelligence that way. So AI takes on a life of its own in the truest sense. Artificial general intelligence is what they call that, as opposed to narrow AI systems, which there are many today. There's lots of narrow AI. That's an important subject too, I think. But yeah, that's the singularity, the explosion of artificial general intelligence. Yeah.
And well, there's a lot of like musicians, like I know Fear Factor, a band I grew up listening to. They talked a lot about like man versus machine, and obviously everybody's watched the Terminator. And I mean, is that could possibly be a possibility. The idea that eventually they realize they don't need us and all this stuff, but it's hard because to predict the future, we've always so often we're wrong. It's like you look at concept cars, it's like that's what a future car is going to look like, and then we get there and we're like, no, it looks nothing like that. So it just it's one of those things we're so often wrong. And even like 10 years ago or 20 years ago, to predict this cell phone in our that we have, this technology that we carry with ourselves every single day, I mean, very few people could have predicted that. And what's, from your opinion, do you think that is possible, eventually having artificial intelligence and then maybe even one day turning on man, or is that just something that's fun to fantasize about, make films about? But do you think that there's really nothing to worry about? I mean, obviously privacy is another thing I want to talk about, because as technology evolves, it seems like privacy disappears. And but when it comes down to that, I mean, is that a real fear, or is that something that it's just fun to fantasize about?
I think it's definitely possible, and it could happen, but also the fact that it's fun to fantasize about is something to note as well. And I think that because it's so rife for that, for speculation and fun to play around with fiction and things like that, that it is an easy tool, just the tool of distraction, talking about what artificial intelligence will be sometime in the future. Whereas we do have a lot of artificial intelligence systems that are, again, the narrow AI systems. So example of this is like a machine that can drive itself and avoid obstacles, like an autonomous car, but something that would somehow learn and remember things. They could have that added onto it, so it remembers where it went and then it saves that and is able to repeat that. Something like that. That's a narrow AI system. There's so many narrow AI systems. It's staggering. And the use of AI is pretty interesting when you look at it. And you don't hear a lot about those sort of more mundane narrow AI systems from the people who are touting transhumanism and singularity. It's always the futurism stuff, what artificial general intelligence will be later. And then I've actually, I've met a few of these guys in person. I've tried to ask them these sorts of questions.
Oh.
And they do brush it off. So for me personally, that was an indication that, like, okay, this is an area that they don't like to talk about, and the privacy sorts of things, and they don't like to answer those sorts of questions. They'll answer all the questions that you have about, will the Terminator situation exist? They love those questions, but about the real mundane, boring, not so boring, AI stuff of the present day, they tend to avoid it.
Well, I know the last time you were on Guy Evans' show, Smells Like Human Spirit podcast, at the end of the show, he was talking about, I think he threw out some of his, if I remember correctly, he threw out a couple of his opinions on the idea of mixing human and man, or machine and man. And, he talked about, well, he thinks that we should just let things evolve naturally, and man shouldn't get involved, and if we get involved and we start changing what is a human, then it could turn out bad and whatnot. But it kind of made me think about, well, what the hell is a human, and what is naturally evolution? Like, it's like if I build a house, then that what just happened wasn't natural. Nobody ever looks at like, oh, man building a house is natural. But if a bunch of animals, a beaver builds a dam, then that's natural. That's nature. And it just like, so it's like if something like, if it's almost like everything that is caused by natural beings on this earth, wouldn't that, whatever they do, be a natural step and evolvement? And so, even So in other words, like, what is evolution? What is natural? What's not natural evolution? And that's like an interesting debate. And I think it's hard to say what is or what isn't.
Yeah, that's an important thing to remember. It's a philosophical pitfall you want to be aware of. And it's true. I mean, man is a unique creature in that his consciousness allows the creation of new objects and of technologies and things like this. And that's just part of our nature, and therefore it's a natural thing that occurs. So we have to remember that. On the other side of the coin, just because we can do something doesn't mean that we should always, you know what I mean? And we should act like we know what we're doing. If we're saying we're going to build artificial lives and this and the other, we have to understand the reality that there's unforeseen consequences with developing any given technology. And that can be easy to forget. It can be incredibly difficult to try to come up with some kind of ethics to prevent these sorts of things. I mean, quite honestly speaking, so it's problematic. So it's a catch-22, you know, like ever since the fall from Eden, you know, there's no turning back. It's that sort of, I mean, it goes back to that deep of a level of what it means to be human. And certainly when it comes to philosophy, it's tied. It's a required subject that comes along when you're talking about transhumanism. It just automatically comes in, and that's why a lot of the transhumanists themselves style themselves philosophers, because they know that a lot of the philosophical questions are the most important ones.
Yeah, and those are ones, like you said, you can't avoid when talking about this subject, because, you know, when do we cross the line of what's moral or not moral, or what's human and not human? And these are, like most things in philosophy, there's not a black or white answer. There's just, you know, there really isn't answer to the question. So a lot of people just talk about it, and everybody has their own opinions, but there's no black or white right answer. So yeah, I think that's another thing that really, I think, is going to be a huge issue. And I know you review some movies on your podcast and stuff like that. And there has been quite a few in the last couple of years that, you know, with this whole theme. And I know the Johnny Depp one recently. And talking about this topic, one thing that's interesting, and talking about moral, you know, is it morally right or wrong? In that movie, Transcendence, there was you know, that anti-robot, technology, like terrorist group kind of, you know, that like shot him and killed him. And I remember watching that, and I'm like, you know, that could possibly be the future, where there's people, I mean, just like, you know, Christian blowing up abortion clinics, there could be, you know, people who are anti-robot, who believe that, you know, technology is evolving too quickly or too fast or going too far, and then they end up turning on scientists and stuff like that, and that's kind of an interesting thing, you know, the whole idea. And it's because of, you know, the moral principle, the idea of like, well, is this wrong or is this right? You know, even the abortion thing, there's still people debating when is it okay to have one, when isn't it, and all this stuff. And it's kind of an interesting debate. You see that happening, something like that, where people will turn against it, and maybe even possibly go as far as having, you know, terrorist events for these type of things, for a GF 2045, you know, something like that. Or is that possible? Is that something that, you know, because I mean, I guess people are passionate, and people, if you get enough angry people together, then they'll you know, they'll influence each other, and they could be passionate enough to do something like that, because obviously people who blow up abortion clinics believe they're doing the right thing and believe that their heart's in the right place. So, you know, it is kind of an interesting look into the future if something like that could be.
That's a good point to think about. I'm glad you brought that up, because it's been something that's been on my mind the past year or so. And I do absolutely think that not only could this happen, but it will happen. As far as transhumanist technologies, converging technologies develop, I mean, they're going to develop one way or another. As that goes further, there are going to be reactionary groups that fight against that. And I know that superficially, probably people who have a passing, know me in passing, what I do, you know, like with making the film and like criticizing transhumanism in general. The superficial idea would be I would be totally on board with that, and I'd be like some sort of leader in that group. I'm not of that opinion at all. I would not want to have anything to do with those groups. I would say, and I'm in fact saying before it even happens, that we have to look out for those sorts of things, because reactionary movements are rarely, they're almost never positive. They're not constructive. They're also can be used as tools for the establishment to take advantage of their opposition, their own opposition. So it's a perfect way to create controlled opposition. Even if it's not totally in the establishment's control, it's in their interest to promote crazy radical groups, because whatever this crazy radical group is arguing against, it bolsters that. So the opposition to the radical group is shown to be good just because the radical group is so bad. You know what I mean? So if it's a bunch of like yelling morons with signs and like they're actually doing violent things, that can happen too. If people are doing that and they're doing it in the name of trying to halt technology, trying to stop technology, you know, just saying that we have to worry in some way, shape, or form about technological development, then the general public will be like, oof, I don't want to be like them, so therefore I just won't worry about it. You know what I mean? It really is that simple. So that's something to look out for in the future. I mean, it's something that's been on my mind a lot. So I hope that people, I don't know, can be ready when it does likely occur. And I don't like to say that it is likely, but I just do think that it is.
Yeah, because I think it will too. I mean, more than likely, I think it will happen, because I think that, you know, there's extreme groups and you know, backing up every opinion, every debate. And, you know, like you said, unfortunately, when you go to that extreme, people lose track of what you're even fighting for, and people just look at your acts, and usually it turns people against you. The same way that, you know, our intervention in the Middle East creates terrorism, and then terrorists create more guys who are, you know, waving the Confederate flag saying, I love America, let's go in there and fuck those motherfuckers. You know, it's like, so it's one of those things where anytime there's extremists on one side, you almost provoke extremists on the other side. And, you know, people see it all the time. You know, that's why a lot of people have written about the idea that drone attacks create more terrorists. And I tell people, I'm like, why wouldn't it? You know, if you were at a coffee shop and some drone came around and was meant to kill somebody there and then end up killing you or killing a loved one that was with you, your life, you know, purpose will be to get revenge on whoever, you know, did that. And so, I mean, it's easy to, it's funny because we always look at things from just our perspective, but we have to see things from other people's perspectives. If the Soviets were over here with drones in the skies here, you know, there'd be a lot of hatred towards the Soviets, even though, you know, propaganda's done a good job of having enough hatred towards the Soviets. But, you know, you always get those old school guys. They're like, those damn commies. And I'm like, yeah, but we're borrowing money from other communists in China. So I'm like, you know, how come you pick and choose which ones you're okay with? But, you know, it is funny how we don't ever realize that, you know, well, one person's terrorists, another person's freedom fighters, and they provoke each other. So in your film and in your book, and I have it right here. So if people want to see it right here, you can get this on your website and on Amazon. And you talk about eugenics, and it was funny because I didn't know that eugenics was a topic that was going to be in your documentary when I watched it, but it made sense because once I saw it, it was something that I thought about too. I'm like, yeah, I mean, how can that not be talked about? And you know, even like eugenics, a lot of the history with a lot of people believe it has to do with classism and like, you know, the stronger will survive and the weaker, so we must be better than you, and that's why we have more money and that's why we're more powerful. And obviously when technology evolves and people can live forever, possibly the same thing could happen where the rich could live forever. You ever watch that film In Time with Justin Timberlake? Yeah, I know. You're probably thinking this movie probably sucks. That's Justin Timberlake.
Never seen it now.
Yeah, I wish I said any other actor but him. But actually, it was the story, the idea seemed interesting. So I watched it, and it was actually really interesting. It's this idea that you're basically you have this little timer on your wrist, and it shows how much time you have left on this earth, and it keeps ticking backwards. And if you can buy more time, basically. And so the rich live forever, and the poor are just, you know, making ends meet, working and trying. And you actually buy things with that time, like you can use that time to buy things and stuff like that. So if you're hungry, you know, sometimes you have to give up some of your, you know, time to get food and all this stuff. And but the idea was, yeah, the rich lived forever and the poor didn't. And you know, it kind of makes you think, you know, possibly the same thing when this technology ends up, you know, which I think it probably will, where one day we might quite possibly be able to live forever. When that happens, are anybody in the middle class or lower going to be able to even afford it in the first place? It's going to be something isolated just for the rich, and so that's another interesting topic. And so how did you link eugenics with this whole topic? Like, what did you see was the important link between the two?
There's a number of them, actually. There's some that go down to individuals involved both in transhumanism and in eugenics. The case of Julian Sorel Huxley. He was the guy who coined transhumanism in its modern sense. It has been used previously, but it's very isolated cases, interesting cases. But in the modern context, as Julian Huxley said, we need a new word to describe man becoming more than man through the use of his own scientific ingeniousness, is more or less what he was saying. And I think the word transhumanism will do for this new idea. So he had that. And he also had a rich past in the field of eugenics. I mean, he was a highly lauded eugenicist. He was one of the guys that always given these awards at the big eugenicist conferences, wrote lots of books on it. He was a big advocate for it. And he was very much part of an intelligentsia that has a lot of real sway on making things happen in the world. He and H.G. Wells were buddies too. H.G. Wells was another big-time eugenicist. You don't always hear about that these days. I mean, I find it kind of impressive that he's still remembered and revered in light of how intensely he was into eugenics. Like that didn't discredit him completely, but it hasn't somehow. He lives on. His fiction is good. However, again, with his fiction, he puts in eugenic ideas. If you're looking to find that, you can see it in there. But beyond that, he actually wrote a lot of nonfiction pieces that are definitely not well known. So in those, he's promoting eugenics almost always. Julian Huxley and H.G. Wells and H.G. Wells' son wrote a book together called The Science of Life. I just mentioned this recently on another show, but it's a very important book because it's a biology book. It's a science biology book that was, I believe, marketed to college professors, academics, people in the biology field in the 1920s when it was written. And so for 1,400 pages or so, it's all biological, like going off on tadpoles here and, broccoli grows this way there. And then at the end of the book, it's just this hardcore eugenicist sales pitch, like, oh yeah, eugenics is the way forward in light of everything, and this is how we make the most of our knowledge of biology. So the social biology aspect of things, social biology, social Darwinism, they're all names for eugenics. They were very real projects for people like H.G. Wells and Julian Huxley. And some of these folks, certainly H.G. Wells, we can understand how he wrote about transhumanism too. So, I think it's more than just guilt by association with these guys that they did both things. It does go deeper when you look at how the ideal of using science to perfect the human race and human genetics, it's all about perfecting human genetics, getting rid of all the negative aspects of our biology. So it's very intimately intertwined subjects there.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't know the history with eugenics and like Margaret Sanger and how basically it was like a race war. I mean, it was a way they didn't want African Americans and people in the lower classes to reproduce and have children, and Margaret Sanger was funded by one of the Bush family, whoever it was at that time. I forget. It wasn't Prescott Bush. I think it was before that, right? It was, but I know there were some ties there, and who funded her was really interesting, and she basically was a racist, and she opened up what ended up being Planned Parenthood now, but in Brooklyn, and had only African American staff, and it was pretty obvious, and I'm not saying that it's necessarily the case now. Obviously, Planned Parenthood does some good things now, but if you look at the roots of it, it definitely doesn't seem like a coincidence that, there were, it looked like, even though they were telling everybody it was for this and for that, it seemed like it was pretty obvious. And at that time, I don't think the term eugenics was such a bad term until, really World War II and the Nazis. I think at that time, people could say they're pro eugenics, and it didn't seem like such a bad term. And then when they, the Nazis really made it public that, hey, that this is, it could be used for, this philosophy could be used for evil things, and to, I guess, keep the richer class rich. I mean, this thing about classism, I think, is really interesting, because I think the same thing with eugenics, I think, influenced or is influenced by classism, and the rich and powerful trying to stay rich and powerful, and having this sense of we're more important, more intelligent, and more capable to control people and make the decisions. I think it's the same thing with a lot of this, the future of technology, and when they're going to be more capable and more, or they're going to believe they're more capable of having the ability to live forever and stuff like that. So it is a interesting, conversation, and interesting when you look into, and it's funny because I remember once reading on alternative news website about Margaret Sanger, and then I just checked Wikipedia, and it had like everything there, and I'm like, holy shit, I'm like, this stuff's not even hidden. I'm like, this stuff is just in plain sight. If you do a little bit of research, you find so much stuff. And I know a lot of these topics that people call them like fringe topics and stuff that, oh, it's a conspiracy theory, but it's like, no, man, you do your research. There's something about history. It seems like if it happened a long time ago, it's okay. Like, we just look at it as, oh, it happened a long time ago, people aren't doing the same shit today. But it's like, no, they're doing the same shit today, only right now it's called a conspiracy theory. 50 years from now, it's just going to be called a historical event. And so it's just it's funny how that works out, because you can read on Wikipedia about Margaret Sanger and the eugenics and all that stuff, and it's no big deal. But if you talk about anything like that now, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's a conspiracy theory. So it is funny how when it happens a long time ago, it's completely okay, and people accept it a lot more than now.
That's a real phenomenon that I've noticed for sure. And with the biology field especially, I mean, this is fitting here, that it was just kind of commonly accepted among the new field of genetics, especially when genetics was coming up, right about the time that book, The Science of Life, was written, that those guys were hardcore into the social biology, social Darwinism thing, and eugenics. And when they read a book like The Science of Life, they're like, yes, they're nodding their heads. Yes, Julian Huxley and H.G. Wells, I agree. This is good. Let's go with this project of social biology and go about eugenics campaigns, because it will improve the fitness of our race. That's what we need to do. And it's good that genetics is coming to the fore, because it offers us a vehicle to do that. And of course, you have the propaganda machine developing over the past century as well, and coming to new levels of technical excellence, like people just developing public relations and propaganda techniques. That's been going on the whole time. And that's something that works subversively. That's the nature of it. It needs to be incomprehensible. It needs to be invisible. It needs to work, but the process of public relations and propaganda cannot be consciously recognized. Otherwise, it loses its power. So the nature of the subject lends itself to being hidden and not talked about, and being the specialty of a closed sect of specialists. That's what it is. And through public relations techniques, you can pretend that one thing is another thing, or you just get people to. It's the same thing as magic. It's all about where attention is. It's not about what you think the trick is. It's like someone just disappeared on stage. No, it's where your eye is being led. It's sleight of hand techniques. So magic and public relations and alchemy and the mystical ideas like that actually tie together intimately, and I find that sort of stuff fascinating.
Oh yeah, I think public relations is really interesting because one person I've talked a lot about on the show, and I think most people have in the alternative media, is Edward Bernays, and I know there's tons of great documentaries out there about his history and his influence, and Adam Curtis does a bunch of good films on it, and but yeah, I mean, there's something about being tricked. There's a quote, and I, like usual, I won't. I'll probably get it wrong and not remember who said it, but it was. It's easier to trick somebody than convince them they've been tricked, and it's an interesting quote because it's so true. You know, it's like, I think people don't want to be wrong. So somebody could fool you the first time into something, but then to convince them that, hey, you're being fooled, it's like telling them that, you know, reality is just, you know, we're in a computer, or we're in, you know, it's telling them that what they see isn't real, and it's really hard to convince people of that. I mean, like, I'm sure just like yourself, I got in a lot of debates over the 9/11 thing with people because I'm just like, listen, let's just go over the facts. Let's not get emotional. Let's just see if this makes sense. Because a lot of people, it's this patriotic thing where just like you bring up something like that, and people just think that, oh, that's bullshit, that can't be, you know. But it's like, you know, you look at past events, and this goes back to the whole thing where if it happened a long time ago, it's okay. And you look at a lot of 9/11 documentaries, and I believe Loose Change is like that, and 9/11 on New Pearl Harbor, like they do a good job of showing you, okay, historically things like this have happened. There's been real false flag events that we know for a fact have been used to, you know, to it's been lied to, and it's been used to
start the Vietnam War, for instance.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Gulf of Tonkin and all that stuff, and people know about Northwoods and all this stuff, and Pearl Harbor now is very well known for it. You know, obviously the sanctions provoked it, and that there were some people who knew that it was going to happen, and all this stuff. So I mean, they use it for other agendas, for geopolitical reasons or whatever. But if you talk about those events because they were a long time ago, people will have no problem talking about it. But then you say, okay, now if we're on the same page about those events, how about 9/11? They're like, oh no, that's bullshit. And it's like, it goes back to what we talked about, this idea that because it happened a long time ago, maybe because we're emotionally detached from it, it's okay, but it's because we're still emotionally attached, and I think the images and stuff are still so real and so current that people have a hard time accepting that. And it's like one of those things where, you know, it's easier to be tricked than be tricked again. I mean, a lot of us, like, you know, like ourselves, feel like people were tricked, and to convince them they're you know, that they were tricked is a very hard thing to do. And I think the first thing people do is fight back and get defensive and not want to believe the facts. But I understand that. And one thing I always try to do is try to see it from their point of view, because I remember the first time I started connecting dots, and I'm like, holy shit, like, I think there's something else happened here. And it was weird. It was like somebody told you that you're living in the Matrix. And so I'm sure that's probably how I sound talking to somebody else who believes the official story, you know. And but I always say, I mean, look at the JFK assassination. That's you know, whatever you believe happened, it was a conspiracy to kill the president, regardless what your theory is on what happened. And if that can happen, then fuck, anything can happen. And you know, a democratically elected president of the most powerful country in the world gets shot in front of everybody, then you know, what else would they do? So it's interesting. But the whole eugenics thing is interesting. I mean, this whole topic is interesting because it goes to go into something else that I wanted to talk about was what is a human and what is consciousness. And I know in that Johnny Depp movie, they download his consciousness into a computer. And I don't know, you ever watched the series Black Mirror on Netflix?
No, but that's a very interesting title, to say the least.
Yeah, it's really good, and it's a UK little series, and you would love it. I almost figured you would probably 100% watch it because it has a lot of, each episode is basically a glimpse into what the future could look like, and they do such a good job with the acting, and it feels so real, and it seems so realistic, and they really have everything so well thought out that it seems like this could possibly happen, that it blew my mind. It was unbelievable. So definitely check Black Mirror out, anybody who hasn't seen it. It's on Netflix. But one of their episodes, similar idea, this idea that you can just take people's thoughts and ideas, and you know, on one of their episodes, they downloaded you know, all this emails and anything you have from a loved one who passed away, and you could take pictures and all this stuff and put it into a system that basically recreates this person. And the more information you put in there, like text messages or whatever, a better sense of who that person was. So a better representation of who that person was. And you know, you hear about this, you know, this idea that, you know, you possibly could recreate consciousness or download consciousness into something and live into a machine. But what the fuck is consciousness? And like, what, you know, like that's the you know, the $100 billion question is like, what is consciousness? And not just that, like who I am today isn't who I was yesterday or who I am tomorrow. Like we're constantly changing. And that's the other thing too. It's like, okay, so maybe you can get a good something that represents me now, but we should always be progressing as people. We should always be figuring things out. I hope you do. You know, I hope we are. You know, I mean, most of us do self. You know, well, not most of us, but you know, I think most people I have on the show, like yourself, do some self-reflecting and try to figure out the world and themselves. So because we're constantly doing that, that also means we're always evolving and our opinions are always changing. And if they're always changing, so you're capturing my opinions and thoughts and ideas at this moment, but tomorrow I could decide that, holy fuck, I was completely wrong about that. You know, I just rewatched Aaron's documentary, read his book, and my opinion on this was completely wrong. You know, and so it's one of those things where, you know, do you see that being a possible thing? This idea of finally figuring out what consciousness is and being able to capture it and the way it evolves.
I don't think anybody's going to get an answer that satisfies what they're looking for in that regard, because consciousness is a mystery. And I like how you're pointing out there the strange tendency of human nature to not be able to admit that it's wrong, because we equate the fact that we may have been wrong about a particular thing with defeat. So it's almost admitting defeat. Like, because we held this particular opinion at one point in time, we have to hold on to it and not be able to change it because it's wrong. However, it's an odd thing, because, okay, if it's wrong and you realize it's wrong now, you'd be right in changing it. But the inability to do that, the inability to say, okay, so what, I was wrong, I can take on new ideas and new evidence, that's fine. Like, if I was wrong before, it doesn't matter. So what? Big deal. The stumbling block to actually doing that is mind-boggling. It's really unfortunate, but it does seem to be sort of the default for people, that they don't like to do that. They don't like to admit that they're wrong. They don't want to have to listen to new stuff and change their ideas and go forward and stuff like that. But for anybody who can do that, I mean, that's where all the exciting stuff is. I mean, personally, that's how you personally evolve, personal evolution. That's how you go about doing it, is listening to new ideas. So yeah, it's crazy just how that. I think it's important to recognize that as just what people tend to want to do, but to be able to consciously go beyond that, be like, okay, I'm gonna change things here. That's interesting, because it takes conscious effort to do that. So, yeah, I don't know exactly where I'm going with this, but I do know that that's important to do.
Well, absolutely. I think it's and I think it's an important point, because I think most of us like to believe that we make rational, logical decisions, but most of us make emotional decisions, then find rational reasoning for it. And it's just, you know, it's just one of those things where it just, we like to believe that, and I'm sure you've had debates with people where you can tell right off the bat, once they get emotional, or once you realize they're emotionally attached to their opinions or their point of views on something, then all of a sudden they go over the top. And it's just like, I've had very logical conversations with people where they seem very reasonable, but then we talk about one topic that they're emotional about. They're very emotionally invested in it. They really have established opinion on, and then all of a sudden they just completely unreasonable. And I'm just like, what the fuck? I'm like, you seem like such a reasonable person until now. And it's like, this is the one topic that all of a sudden it's like you're completely ignoring any other point of view, any other argument, any other debate. And I think that's such an important thing. You know, it's it's like one of those quotes. I'm gonna fuck this one up too, but
Sure.
The dangerous thing about a smart person and a dumb person is that they that one can convince themselves of it. They both can convince themselves of anything. You know, one is smart enough to one of them is smart enough to find reasons to believe something, and the other one is dumb enough where they can ignore reason to stick to their point of view. And it's just that was completely wrong. I'm sure whoever wrote it.
I get the gist of that. I know what you're talking about.
I just disappointed somebody who actually knows that quote, but but it's you're right. It's more important the idea of the quote than the actual words of the quote. But I think the idea is, it makes a very good point, and just this idea that, you know, there's people who absolutely can be ignorant and just ignore any other facts and stick to their guns, that this is my opinion regardless. And then there's a very intelligent person can also find reasons to believe any idea, and they're smart enough to kind of connect the dots that they, you know, that help make sense of their point of view. So it just, and I think self-reflection is so important, and that's one thing I loved about alternative media, because growing up as a musician and writing music and stuff, like one thing I always loved about music and writing music was the looking in the mirror and having to self-reflect and trying to figure out who you are as a person, and trying to figure out where you stand on certain issues, or you know, just trying to figure out yourself and self-reflecting. And it was always just fun, because it was just it's what made philosophy interesting to me, was that there's no right or wrong answer. And that's why I always hated math growing up, and I always loved other things, because I'm like, math is so boring. It's black and white. There's a right answer and a wrong answer. There's nothing fun in between to kind of use your imagination and be creative. And you know, that's what I loved about music. And then the alternative media was a whole nother thing, where it just took that to another level, where just like now I'm like rethinking everything, and I'm trying to figure this out. And it's like, you know, anybody who watches documentaries, reads books, or does research like yourself, you know, it's fun to connect the dots when you figure shit out, you know, when you're like, holy crap, there's a link between this and that. And I think, you know, that's fun. And but I don't know what the hell that has to do with self-reflection, but some way I led there one way or another. But
well, I know what you're getting on about. I relate to you a lot, Ricky, because I'm a creative person too, and art and music too. I played an instrument as a young child. I always still like composing silly little songs and stuff like that. But I've always liked art, and that always intrigued me, and that's where my interest took me. In school, like you're saying, math was boring. Math was boring. I think there's a real gap that's just longing to be filled in the teaching of math, in that if you were to start teaching, especially once you get to high school level with things like geometry and algebra and all that sort of advanced stuff, especially geometry, if they were to, before they start teaching the numbers part of it, they give you the philosophy behind it, and sort of that's a whole aspect of it. Like, okay, here's we're going to talk about geometry, but there's actually like a whole interesting philosophical side to this, and you know, don't get too attached to the numbers, because numbers are just a way of a way of counting things, but it's a limited system that works within the framework that it works. But look at the greater philosophical thing, that there's a lot going on there. I think if that were done in school, I think people like you and I would be interested all of a sudden, like, oh, there's this sort of stuff going on, and I didn't think of that math had this side to it.
Oh, am I losing you? Still there?
Yeah.
Oh, connection.
And I think it would intrigue kids more. Let's hear me. Hello.
Yeah,
Hello?
yeah, I hear. Yeah, the signal weakened for a little bit, but I think you're back.
Okay.
But yeah, it is. That's because if you look at like just the Freemasons and, you know, the Freemason symbol, like the secret geometry and like understanding the world around us using math, and you know, if somebody explained that to me, all of a sudden I'd be paying attention. I would be interested. I'd be like, wait, there's people who can understand the world using math, or they did use math to understand the world, and you know, you look at. I forget what it's called, but the shapes that are appealing to people, like the philosophy that, you know, when people shape design cards, or there's certain shapes and stuff like that appeal to people, and why that is, and that's all math, and shapes that make sense. So I think I even saw a documentary on beauty once, and like the certain types of faces that are proportioned a certain way that we're more attracted to, and that's all math. It's like it's all about being squared and being, well, maybe not square face, but being even, and everything be proportioned and all that stuff. And if somebody talked about, like you said, those type of theories and those type of things, and how math is important in that, then all of a sudden we would be paying attention. But the thing about creative people, it does seem like a lot of, like, I've met a lot of engineers and people who were very much just like, they like the black or white answer. Like they didn't like being creative. They liked the fact that there's a right or wrong answer. They didn't like pondering into this unknown area in your brain where there is no answer at times, and you're trying to search for it yourself. And but to me, that was always the most interesting place to be and to hang out. And that's why, and a lot of things that I'm sure me and you have both read and watched about, just schools dumbing people down. And I think that the fact that arts or and music always gets cut first, and I think the reason why they try to stop people from doing psychedelics and all these things that can be mind expanding and make you look at things from outside the box. And I think it's not it's not a coincidence that they try to keep kids away from that stuff, because I think even during Vietnam, I think the fact that the hippies were so messed up on shit that they couldn't trick them into being pro war, Vietnam War, probably was a big help in helping them be like, well, this propaganda is not working because I'm messed up and I can see things from different perspectives, and so I think there's something to it. Even a lot of people I've had on this show, really creative people, a lot of them have had some type of psychedelic, or they've smoked weed or done edibles and done something to kind of expand their mind. And it's funny because I don't smoke weed, but I did do edibles not that long ago, because as an adult, like, I'm like, you know what? I'm like, the idea of like possibly seeing things from outside the box, because we do get in a rhythm, we're creatures of habit, we're always doing the same thing. And, it always seems like I get my best ideas when I get out of that box and I either travel somewhere, or I do, get off, my schedule gets all screwed up and I'm doing something out of schedule. And you don't realize that you're stuck in this rhythm and this motion. We become, machines and just moving like machines, doing the same thing over and over again. And so I did edibles for that reason. I'm like, oh, let me see if if I can have some psychedelic experience. But I kind of messed up because I was watching Wolf of Wall Street, and it was way too much stimulation for edibles. That was a bad experience. But yeah, but I think there's something to it. I think there's something to art and being creative, and people looking at things outside the box, and people who are creative. And I think we all have those genes. I think we're all capable of it. I think that unfortunately people stop doing it, and then you just become this machine where people like us, we love doing it, and we find energy and time to continue doing it, and we see the benefits of it, of becoming more intelligent, understanding yourself and the world around you, and I think that's such an important thing, and it's a shame that a lot of people just stop, because when we're kids, we all doodle on the back of papers, we all paint, we all do, we like playing with little pianos, and we love being creative, and then it gets to a point where just like life gets in the way, and purposely, and puts you in debt, and then you having to be a slave to to some corporation to pay off the debt, and then you just get stuck in the life routine. So it's awesome that to meet people who continue to do it, and like myself, probably don't have all the time in the world, but find the time to continue to do this, even though we have every excuse not to. So is that ever been a struggle of yours to, like, you ever think about, like, holy shit, like, I'm procrastinating like crazy and I need to get this done, and because that's, I think, something that a lot of people, even personally, I've had people talk to me and they're like, how do you find time to do this? And they think like I'm super motivated all the time. And even though I am motivated, like, we all have to fight procrastination. Like, we all do it, no matter who you are, like, we all sit in bed for a couple more hours when we know we have other shit we got to be doing. We all, so it's just, I'm sure that's something you fight with, right?
Yeah. Like you're saying, everybody. And I love how you're talking about the creativity that's so prevalent in everybody's childhood. It's there. And I think everybody can at least remember that. The trick is finding a reason to continue that in the face of a world that is blaring over a loudspeaker telling you that indulging in any form of that sort of creative outlet is total distraction. It's childish. It's immature. Hey, grow up already. You got obligations. You've got, and again, you're saying there's no shortage of responsibilities thrown at us. And people like you and myself, I can't help but question a lot of those responsibilities and how much validity they really have. Like, well, okay, I understand a lot of these, and yes, that's correct. There are certain things I need to do, and growing up is real. However, it's not to say that we should completely stop being creative, stop indulging in that aspect of the child mind that we should be nurturing throughout our entire life and using it for creative endeavors. I mean, just being creative somehow. And there's so many different ways to do that. I think it's a human need. It's something that we all need to do. And for people who don't, I would venture to guess that's where a lot of depression might come from, is because people just haven't done that. They haven't, for them personally, they haven't been able to verify that it is valid as a thing that does need to be done, and the world be damned, I'm going to do what I want to do, no matter what people are saying, because I know that I need to. A lot of people just haven't done that, and it's a real shame, and it's sad, and I wish we were more forgiving of people doing creative things, or it's even beyond that. I wish we could somehow nurture it more, and it's so hard to know how to do that is the issue. It's like, well, how do you get other people to do anything, really? You can't get anybody to do anything other than yourself. So it comes down to just you making a decision in your own mind, saying, yes, this is something I want to continue to do, and it's important. And there do seem to be people here and there who it is really important to do that. So we recognize each other. Each other.
Well, there's that book, what is it, War of Art, by Pressfield, about procrastination, and it just, it's just one of those things that I think a lot of us deal with. But I think a lot of people who don't get shit done look at people who are getting shit done, and they're like, oh, they're just different than me. That they're motivated, or they have the time, or you find every excuse in the world to continue doing the same thing. And then, like, I have friends that have hobbies that they've kind of drifted away from, and I'm like, dude, find the time to do it. And I'm like, you'll be so much happier if you do. You're gonna be creative. You're going to be out of, it's going to be a sense of therapy. You're going to be able to just focus on that one task or that thing you're working on, and you're not going to be worried about money or bills or, priorities and all that stuff. And I think too, it's like and then I think there's social pressures too, because I think a lot of people, it's like, your purpose in life is to pay your bills, have a family, and then die. And then that's like, and I'm like, if that's like our purpose, and what the fuck, like that sounds like the most meaningless life ever. It's like we have this social pressure of like, wait, you're not married yet? Oh, you don't have kids yet? It's like, well, if people are pursuing their passions, or people are doing other things, then nobody should be picked on for not having this ridiculous idea that our only proper way of living is having a family and doing all this stuff. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with that, but there's also nothing wrong with, like, even Christopher Ryan's, who I'm a fan of, and his podcast and his book Sex at Dawn, who is I think he's in his 50s or late 40s, maybe 50s, and he's never had kids. And he talks about how that's a weird, sometimes for other people that's a weird thing, the way they look at him, because he's that age and he hasn't had kids. And it's just like, this guy's doing a podcast, and he's writing books, and he's traveling the world, and who is anybody to say that what he's doing is wrong? If it makes him happy and if he's enjoying it, then who are we to say that you should have that picket fence and get married? And I think that idea was sold to us for such a long time that people really thought it made them happy, and that's when you start seeing all these people getting married because and having this picket fence and starting a family, maybe too quickly, or not really putting as much thought into it, and then they find that, holy shit, I'm not happy, and then the divorce rate fucking blossomed. So because I have personal friends and who've been got divorced, and they're happier now than they've ever been, and they're just like, what, I did these things because I thought those were the things I should be doing and the things that would make me happy, and then I realized, holy shit, it didn't make me happy. So
yeah, I see that all the time. People getting married because they have a sense of obligation. You're like, okay, this is the next step in life, therefore I have to do it. That's just the living life as a formula. I just don't understand how there's not a bigger backlash to that than there is. I know that there is, and you can see that more all the time too. People will say, no, I'm not falling for this anymore. But along with that, the social pressures continue, and people get made fun of for just living life in a different way than what's perceived as normal. It's just a real shame, and I guess it's that fear and intimidation factor that actually makes those other people who felt obligated to do something that they wouldn't have done otherwise to do that. So it's all this like fear, intimidation, weirdness that we do. I mean, it's nothing new. I think this has always been in any form of human society forever. There's always been some form of this. But when it comes to, the great promise of Western civilization, ironically enough, is the complete unleashing of the individual. That's the ideal that's in there, actually. Whether we're actually going to do that or not, or whether we just pay lip service to that in one sense, but in another sense we kind of shoot it down. It'd be interesting to see where things ultimately head. As far as things ultimately get anywhere, it'll just be funny to see how things develop as time goes on.
Yeah. And before I forget, because there's another thing I wanted to talk about, and then I completely got off track, but was privacy. I think I mentioned that about an hour ago, privacy. But the idea, and you ever watch that documentary, We Live in Public? And this, very interesting documentary. And I remember watching that documentary, and I'm like, holy shit, that could be the future. The idea that there is no privacy, that we're always being watched, and we live, and then how it affects the psyche. Because in that film, you saw people who at first were very timid, and then as they just accepted the fact that they could see everybody, everybody could see them, then chaos broke out. And and even with the main subject of the film, who ended up trying to film his own life, and kind of could absolutely be a reason why he went a little crazy and why his marriage didn't work out. But it's interesting, and I know some people, I know even Joe Rogan has mentioned, he thinks in the future that there's going to be no more privacy, and people are going to be okay with that, and everybody's going to know what everybody's doing. That way, nobody can lie to each other, and maybe it'll be a good thing because nobody can bullshit each other. But I don't know, man. Even though we're social creatures, and even though we do like being in groups and being around people, I also do absolutely love privacy, and being like yourself, somebody who likes being creative. You do that. You do your best job being creative when you're by yourself and you're in a private. That's why I think a lot of us work well at night. I don't know if you do, but a lot of us get shit done at night because there's less distractions. There's not phones going off. There's not people around. There's not, a bunch of stuff going on the news. So what do you think? You think that that's possibly what the future could hold for us? Is this idea of similar to that movie where everything's just being filmed and everything's being monitored, and you really have this sense of like just a lack of privacy?
The concept of surveillance is one that's definitely promoted in transhumanist circles, certainly. Surveillance just being that everybody can see everybody else all the time. That's the ideal. That's what we want to do. We want to be able to see everything all at once. That way, everything's all laid out on the table. That's the idea. Everybody's going to be honest now, and there's no hiding things, none of that kind of stuff. So it will apparently bring out the best in us because of this. I'm not on board at all with this idea. I do value privacy, like yourself there, Ricky, and I see real value in being able to have privacy. I don't think it's right to strip privacy from people. I mean, the fact that people are literally saying that, there just shouldn't be privacy anymore. And they legitimate it by saying, that's the way things are going, so let's just let it happen. That doesn't work for me. I think we should be striving to preserve that. And not just like in a little sense, like, okay, we understand that cell phones basically monitor all our behavior. Technology monitors all our behavior. That's how it is. So just bring your technology with you, and further with transhuman upgrades, put the technology in you, so it's inside you. So you're just tracked and traced no matter what by default. And that's the idea. That's kind of like the idea that's an idea that comes built into transhumanism. That surveillance is built into the into the human being then. And so you're just supposed to, if you're for pro-transhumanism, you're just supposed to accept that by default. I don't think people should be that way. I think we should be very much resisting that idea just alone, like, because of the value of privacy. It is really valuable. It's something that we need to hold on to. It's something that's going to be increasingly difficult to have in the future. It's not going to make it any less important, though. It's always been important. And yeah, that's going to be more and more challenging as years go on, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's a great video online on YouTube. I forget who does a lecture, but the name of the video is "Free is a Lie," and it's all about. I highly recommend anybody looking this up, and it's all about, like, it talks a lot about Google. I remember that's the part that I really remember, the idea that basically, like, even the reason why the Nexus phone, and it's what I actually use. I use a Nexus 5, and the reason why it was so cheap, because you can get it from Google directly cheap, because they're making tons of money off that information you're giving them, from, like, you know, where you are, what you're searching for, all this stuff, and just it really goes into how Google just basically knows more. It gets to a point where they know more about you than you know about yourself. They know. I remember seeing a statistic recently about how Facebook or Google, Facebook, I think, what they knew when you were going to be in a relationship, or when you were, just by, I think, keeping track with maybe who you're contacting or how intimate you're getting with somebody and all this stuff. Now, even I know even the facial recognition thing's creepy, because I actually have a twin brother, and when we're younger, we looked, identical, and as we got older, we looked different, and but we don't look that similar as much anymore. But he doesn't have Facebook, and every time I upload a picture of me and a couple friends, and my brother happens to be in it, when I scroll that mouse over his face, it says, "Do I want to tag myself?" And I'm just like, I remember the first time that happened, I'm like, that is fucking creepy, man. I'm like, that's not me, but they know it. That person looks like me, and it's like, it was so creepy, and so it just really, even though a lot of times we feel like we have some sense of privacy, everything's being monitored, all our search results. I mean, even during Christmas time, I remember my wife was looking for something for me on my laptop. Then I go on my laptop and I see these ads come up for the same thing. And I'm like, dude, you can't even be secretive anymore, because now they're trying to sell me the same thing she was looking up. So if she wanted to, basically surprise me with something, I'm like, oh shit, she's looking at a brand new this or a brand new that, And but it just, it's creepy how they do that. And I think that privacy is important, and I think my point was that it's one of those things where we think that even now we still have a lot of privacy, and we don't, and the future is only going to get worse. But even now we have this false sense of privacy, but we're constantly being monitored. I mean, every picture you take, they're keeping track of the location, everything. And you look at that documentary, Terms and Conditions May Apply, another really good one on Netflix. I highly recommend it. It's all about, the things we agree to, and how they're always changing it, and how, just all the information we're just giving away, and they're using, even though, and it goes back to the name of that video, free is a lie. We think these services are free, but what we're actually sacrificing is our privacy and personal information. And I think that's a scary thing looking in the future. I mean, you look at, Minority Report, another film that's, well known for this idea of arresting people before they commit an act, even though we kind of do that now, because there's been cases where FBI agents or CIA will provoke somebody to buy shit or give them stuff, and you're like, oh, see, now you're if I give you a gun, you're gonna think about using it, so I should arrest you. It's like, so it's almost like arresting somebody before they actually commit the crime, just because they were thinking it. And there's no laws against thinking something bad. There's laws against doing something bad, and I think that there should absolutely be a difference between the two. The idea that arresting somebody based on thinking of doing something is not the same as actually doing something. There's a lot of us who, I mean, I might get upset and feel like, at my significant other, and at the moment feel like throwing something, but I might not actually throw it. I might just think about it, and so we just like to not even have privacy in our thoughts and in our mind, and having the ability to think what we want is scary, and is that I don't know too much about that technology in the real world. Or is that something they're working on, the idea of possibly arresting people, or before they commit crimes, or some type of technology of getting inside people's heads. I know there's been technology of like they're working on erasing memories, or like having some control of memories, like being able to take out certain memories and stuff, which can be dangerous because, like all technologies, whoever's creating it or working on it might have pure intentions, and then you just get the wrong people who think they can use this for some evil, and then next thing you know, the government's using it to erase something that a guy who was a spy, or whoever, or some guy who's a Mandalorian candidate or whatever, something crazy. So what do you think, is that a possibility? Is that something that they're actually working on?
Something that's been written about quite a bit.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I've read multiple reports that set this up again as an ideal. Like, okay, yeah, pre-crime and being able to punish people for that sort of thing. Something we want to do, something that is valid because of this, and this scientific reason. I know that the 2001 NBIC report that I mentioned in my film, Age of Transitions, pretty heavily at the beginning there. It mentions this. It's like, yeah. Let's do this, more or less. It's certainly paraphrasing, but yeah, I've read other ones that get into the same thing. I wish I could remember at the moment the details of it, because when you read these things, it's like, oh no, wait a minute, what? They're actually recommending this, that because people are inclined to do something, therefore they should be stopped beforehand. It's something that pops up disturbingly often, and in the white papers sort of realm, where I guess it shouldn't be too surprising that like kind of hardcore scientists and like sort of materialistically minded people get onto this like bend of thinking like, well, because someone is wired a certain way, that means that it pre-concludes that they will do that, therefore they must be stopped, and there's not a lot of gray area in there. It's unfortunate, but yeah, it's definitely something to look out for, some real thing that people are wanting to do.
Yeah, I know Dr. Miko Keku, or Kiku, however you pronounce it.
Yeah.
I know he's talked about the idea of erasing people's memories would be, or being able to have that technology would be a good thing. Because I mean, I understand the idea of if somebody had a very tragic event, you could be able to just get rid of it, erase it. But I mean, I think that sometimes we would be too quick to erase something that actually in the long run might be beneficial, because we learn from those mistakes. It's like, isn't that how we progress as humans? It's like we learn from our mistakes. Well, if you can erase all the memories of every mistake you made, then we'd be pretty dumb humans. It's like, it's kind of a interesting interesting idea and interesting topic. I can see the benefits of it, but like I said, like with almost all technologies, they'll find a way to use it for something bad, and I think that's a scary thing, because I think a lot of people who do work on, a lot of futurists and a lot of people who do work on this technology, they're, they don't have any heinous intentions. They don't have any they don't want to use it for bad things. They just, but unfortunately when this technology exists, then who knows, then who knows what the way people use it and whose hand it gets in. So I think that's a thing to think about. Don't hate the person creating it, or maybe it's nothing against the person creating it. It's just the idea that once it's created, what the possibilities could be scary.
Yeah, well, within the model that they're working in their own mind, see, they're developing the technology, but they're also developing the model in which that technology would operate in the future, and they're projecting into the future. So they are by nature futurists. And it helps to, when you're in that area, to have a real philosophical, to have an emphasis on philosophy, or remember that that's important. I think a lot of scientific developers tend to not have that going. I mean, I don't want to be offensive to anyone. I just think it's incredibly lacking. I think that point could be made pretty easy. So within their limited little model, everything works out fine, because we got the numbers. Again, they got the numbers. It's all written out. Things have been predicted, right? It's funny because so many of these projects are actually about predictions and trying to figure out what the future is going to be. And a lot of AI systems are used in this way to run predictive experiments, taking all sorts of data that Google or Facebook collect, and running it through an AI system to project what a certain person's going to do or what they're going to like. It works to a great extent. However, that is limited too. And just understanding that that is limited and that there are, that you can't just make a model on paper and have it work that way in the real world, like black and white. That's not how things operate.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Well, I don't know if you got my email before the show, but I'm gonna try something new on starting with this episode. I wanted to end shows with something more fun, and I have a lot, like we talked about in the beginning of the show, I have a lot of artists and comedians and filmmakers and all this stuff. And one thing I always think about after I get off the Skype interview with them is like, oh shit, I wonder what they like or what their interests are. So I think I'm going to start with this episode, see how it goes, and see if it's something that the listeners like or is interested in. I also love, one of the reasons why I started this podcast, because I figured people that I'm a fan of, like filmmakers like yourself and other authors and people, I could expose their work to more people and kind of share this interesting work. So I'm going to, at the end of every show, starting with this episode, I'm going to ask 4 questions, and I'll start off right now. What's your favorite artist or album? So any musical album?
Musical artist.
Yeah.
Boy, I gotta admit it's tough on favorites, but I'll choose one of the ones that I really like. I really like the Electric Light Orchestra. Actually, I think they're very good. Their album Time is a really good one. So I guess just that's one of the ones I really like. I'll throw that out there as an answer.
Nice. Okay. And this is fun because I think that one thing I love when I hear other podcasts, if somebody mentions or refers a documentary or book or anything that they like, I'll be like, oh, let me look that up. So hopefully listeners do the same thing. They look up some of this stuff. What's your favorite documentary or book? Something that you would recommend or something that was very influential to your life that really sticks out?
Oh, that documentary or book?
Yeah, or because the thing with me is that I like both, and I know some people who, especially younger listeners, probably don't read books. So I figured if I could, if somebody could, if they mention a documentary, maybe there's a better chance of somebody hearing the documentary and watching it, and then hearing the book and actually purchasing it and reading it. Wait.
Well, I'm a book man. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. That's fine.
This right here. Here's the cover. Author Owen Barfield's Saving the Appearances. This is a book that a listener to my podcast gave me. They mailed me that. So that was a really cool gift. It ended up being one of my most favorite books ever. It's amazing. It's philosophical work. It gets into the history of consciousness and how that actually is a history, how human consciousness in the far past was much different than it is today, and how that's taken for granted. And because that fact is taken for granted, we misunderstand a lot of what we're doing today, of history, things like that. So it's quite an amazing book. I love it.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting, actually. Yeah, we'll have to check that out. And then who's your favorite comedian?
Favorite comedian.
Oh, that's a curveball, huh? You didn't expect it.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. I gotta admit, I'm partial to Tom Green. I really like Tom Green, and he actually talks about this transhumanist stuff a lot in his newer stuff, and he rails against Facebook and things like that. So that's really cool. I think he's a very thoughtful guy, and I think a lot of people miss that fact about him.
Yeah, and he always seemed super nice. Like every time you saw him, you're like, he seems like a sincerely really nice guy. I mean, maybe it's a Canadian thing because I've met quite a few Canadians, and I know James Corbett, Adam Scorgie, and it just seems like Canadians just like sincerely seem like nice people. Maybe I've just been lucky enough to meet the nice ones. I'm sure there's some jerks up there, but for the most part, they seem really nice. And he used to rap too. I didn't know. I don't know who it was that I was listening to a podcast or watching something, and they were like, "Oh, who influenced your rapping style?" And they're like, "Oh, this guy." And then I'm like, "Who the hell is that?" I looked him up, and he was rapping with Tom Green, and I'm like, I didn't know Tom Green rapped, but apparently he was, he used to do a lot of rapping back in the day. So it's kind of interesting. But good choice. He's an interesting guy. I don't know. Does he still do stand up? Oh, did I lose you? And we're back.
I don't know what happened there.
Yeah. Well, sometimes when I do video episodes, I know that it seems like it's harder to go long shows with a video episode because I don't know if it just takes so much power to kind of do the audio and video. But yeah, so Tom Green, and I don't know if you heard, but I was saying how I heard that he rapped, and I looked him up, and he used to, he used to do rapping and stuff, which was pretty interesting, and which made sense because some of the funny videos he did and stuff, you could see that he kind of had a talent for it. And go on.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think he started doing his show as a way to promote his music group, which is a rap group, if I remember correctly.
Really?
So that's how he got into what he's most famous for. It's because he was trying to, like, build up his band or whatever.
Yeah, because that makes sense, because I think who he was rapping with was somebody. I was listening to some show or watching some or listening to some podcast or whatever, and somebody mentioned that this guy was really influential on his rapping. And then I looked him up, and it was a video with him and Tom Green rapping. And I'm like, wait, I didn't know Tom Green actually rapped like for real. I thought it was like it was just like a comedic thing, So that was really interesting, and he was actually pretty good. I'm like, oh shit, he could actually rap. So Bieber might not be the best artist coming from Canada, because there's been a lot of bad Canadian artists like Nickelback and Bieber. So it's good to know that Tom Green's a good one. And the last one, what's your favorite podcast? Obviously, we're both podcasters. This is a podcast. So is there, you're a podcast that's your go-to show that, or, that if you end up missing or keep losing track of a couple shows, this is the one that you always go to?
Well, I'd have to say Clandestine, that's done by my friend Tom Secker. So he's a guy I've had on my show a lot, and vice versa. I've been on Clandestine a lot. I just happen to really like it, and Tom's a cool guy, and I like how he does things, so that would have to be it.
Nice. Yeah, he's been on. I know I've heard him on the Guy Evans show. I've heard him on your show, and did he do a 7/7 film?
Yes, he's done 2 7/7 films actually. Yeah, and he's written a book on it too, so he's very knowledgeable on that subject. But he's branching out more of the podcasts now too, so that's great. I think that's the real strength of the podcast genre, so he's taking advantage of that.
Nice. Well, where can listeners get your stuff? What's the easiest way of getting? I don't think you're on Twitter or Facebook, right? You're keeping your privacy to yourself.
Yeah, it's kind of like a quiet way for me to protest those sorts of things. Yeah. And YouTube is hanging by a thread, I'll just say for right now. But I have a website, so I just put everything on the website, ageoftransitions.com. You can find my documentary there. You can find my book there. You can read the first chapter of the book for free. There's a free PDF download of that, so you can just get a sense of what the book will be like. I post some articles, but I mainly do podcasting these days. So Trans Resistor Radio is my podcast. People want to subscribe to that. I do another podcast with my friend Adam, where it's called Themes to Memes. So that's the one where we review movies primarily. So a lot going on. So check out my website, ageoftransitions.com.
Nice. Thanks, Aaron. I really appreciate your time. It was an awesome and super interesting conversation, because these are one of those topics that are super fun, but there's not a whole bunch of people who really get in depth and have the point of views that you have. And I've seen your name in so many places for a long time now, so I'm super excited that I could finally get you on and talk. So keep in touch, and hopefully we'll get in contact in the future and have another one of these conversations.
Definitely. Thanks for having me here, Ricky.
Thanks, Aaron. Take care.
Believe in the ripple effect.